they had the permission to dump leftovers into the river Monday to Thursday. But it was forbidden to dump any waste into the river Friday till Sunday. Any idea why it was illegal to dump waste into the river Friday till Sunday? Those were the days they took out the water to brew beer. That's why back in the old days, nobody drank water. Water was dirty, water was polluted. So what did they drink? I knew I'm gonna get you on this one. No, they drank wine. 3 to 4 liters a day, up to 1 gallon. But of course, the wine back then did not contain as much alcohol as it does today. It was more like vinegar, but it was safe to drink. Just meet me up here, please. Back in the old days, common people, commoners, were not able to write or read. And that's why people were using symbols to let other people know who was working and living, for example, right here in this building. And quite obviously, 1583, Hans Stark was living here, and no, he was not an axe murderer, he was a butcher. What you can't see or read here is that him and his mom, they both have been accused of using witchcraft. They were both arrested, and after 1 year in jail, after 1 year of unbelievable torture, they both confessed and they both ended up being decapitated. It's quite remarkable. Here in the small town of Wertheim, mostly men have been accused of using witchcraft, and they all had money. Why? Being in jail for a whole year, somebody had to pay for all this. So these poor people had to pay for their food, they had to pay the prison guards, and they had to pay for the experts they brought into town to torture them. And just in case that there was still any money left after they were decapitated, that money was divided between the accuser and the prosecutor, and that's why we know very often financial motives behind those accusations. And since we still got the documents from their trial, we know what the poor man has been accused of. Two teenage girls said they saw him leap to the top window, sitting on a broom. He went down to the riverbanks, and there they saw him change into a rabbit. After 1 year in jail, he confessed, and he ended up being decapitated. When I tell people sitting on a broom change into a rabbit, how funny. No, those accusations did cost him his life. But it was very smart of you that you came and visited us here in Wertheim, because no need to travel all the way to Italy. You do not have to go to Pisa to see our leaning tower, because people often do not. But our leaning tower is called the Pointed Tower, part of city's fortification. They started building it around 1300, and then they realized, oops, it's leaning. So they added the top part about 200 years later, pulled a bit the other way, still leaning. Inside the tower used to be the prison for the minor crimes, the so-called Hole of Fear. And whoever was convicted to spend a few days in there did not sit down the whole time. Any idea why not? No restroom. And we know for a fact the place has not been cleaned for over 350 years. We still got letters from inmates complaining to the Duke, and they wrote that they were standing up to their armpits. People always ask me, why is the tower leaning? Who made a mistake? Nobody made a mistake, but since we are sitting right here at the confluence of two rivers, the town gets flooded.
Wow. What year was that? 2011?
Yes.
Hold it like this. You are standing right next. So 800 years of water pushing towards the tower, and that's why the tower is leaning. And when you turn it around, you see the situation, what it looked like on the market square when the town gets flooded. And right here in front of us, we've got some of our recent floods. And when you look at our old building, they all look the same. Ground floor, storage area. Nobody used to live down here. That was why they kept the coal, the wood, maybe a little pig. Flood mark 2003, flood mark 1995. People always ask, why don't you build walls along the riverbanks like they do in other German cities? Doesn't look nice, but at least would keep the water out of the town. Doesn't make sense here because we're sitting here on sand. And the water is not only coming from the two rivers into town, exactly, most of it comes in from under, and no matter what we do, water always finds its way in. A question I hear quite often too is, why don't you move away? Looks like the town gets flooded all the time. May I ask where you're from? Some of you, North America, US, Canada? England. Australia is too big, but I can't compare Germany with the size of Montana. Montana, 1 million inhabitants. We've got the same size, but we have over 84 million people living in the size of Montana. So very small country, narrow valleys, lots of rivers, lots of people. Where to move to? Stop here. No way out.
How deep are the foundations for these?
The foundations of these old buildings are very low.
Low?
They go deep,
way
very
deep.
deep inside. Yeah.
So she didn't say that was the Winchester.
No, I know.
But no cracks?
Yeah.
Yeah?
So is it, how many blocks in from the river is it? It's not a hotel.
You will see. You will see. We're gonna go where it's quite visible what's happening.
Okay.
So what is the line when the town gets flooded? Grandma needs to go and see the doctor. So what the people do, they call the National Guard, they call the fire brigade. They come by with a little boat, pick up the dog, pick up Granny, and when everything's taken care of, they just return them back home. And every time that I'm here at this little square, it kind of makes me sad. Because this is my hometown, I've seen these places go through so many changes, and around us are 5 buildings up for sale. And nobody wants to buy them. Yeah. This one right behind us sits empty for 15 years. Yeah. And this one right in front of us, the fire brigade commander used to live there. It was nice and neat. And then his family bought it and decided to renovate. They put up a new roof, and when they started to build in new windows, you see those two left ones up there? They look new. Then they were told to stop renovating because they're made out of plastic. Yeah? And they insist that it's all wooden frames. But when you look at the different sizes of the windows, wooden frames, then they need to be custom made, especially, yeah, and they ran out of money. Yeah? Now they're saving money, and it takes a while again. You can buy all these houses. I'm quite sure they would give you money. Yeah, no. Yeah. Not very high, and the water was in town only for 5 days. But up to that day, people were heating their homes with oil. And during that 5-day flood, the water lifted the oil tanks people had in their basements, and they all leaked. And we did not just have water, but an oil spill in the whole town. And from that date on, it's forbidden that people use oil to heat their homes. Now they all have to use natural gas. 6 months after the water was gone, we were still able to smell the oil. It was a disaster. And very often house is flooded, and you do not see it. Because basements are completely filled with water. It takes pumps, it takes pipes to get the water back out, and it doesn't smell good. Because no matter what you put in your basement, it molds because it is so humid. And that takes us to the question, what about insurance? Well, we all can get insurance, but the premium is so high that if you don't have any damage caused by a flood, it doesn't really make a difference. We either pay for the damage to be fixed, or you pay a fortune to the insurance company. I've got a very good deal with my insurance company. I only pay 300 euros per year, and I've got everything covered caused by earthquakes, tornadoes, and what is very important around here, volcano eruptions. 300 euros. But for any damage caused by a flood, I pay a fortune. But I live on higher grounds. Before my place gets flooded, the water's up here second floor. So we have families here. They take care of 2-3 little shops right next to each other. And then very often people say and wonder, well, why don't they have a wall knocked down to get a bigger place? Look at the different heights of the ceilings. Yeah? You knock a wall down, house 300, 400 years old, you end up not having a house afterwards. Yeah. When you look at these old buildings, you don't know of the problems these people are facing. For example, this building, big problem. Shop downstairs, apartment upstairs. So the old owners retire. Now they have the option. If they stay up living upstairs, they cannot rent the shop, because to get upstairs you have to walk through a shop. Yeah. Or you rent a shop and then you have to move out. Because one door, main, Same thing here. Yeah? You have to go to the store. So getting close to the market square, center of the town and center of the old county. And back during the old days, it was a prestige thing. Everybody who thought that he or she was a VIP, they wanted to live right here at the market square. But since we're sitting here on a peninsula and since space was limited, after a while people had to start building their homes to get away from the town center. And when you turn around and you look down the lane you just walked through, or you look down this little alley, you can tell houses were not built in a perfect straight line. Why not? If one was not able to live right here at the market square, at least they wanted to see what was going on, and that's why they made sure one window per floor was facing the market square, because looking out the window and spying on the neighborhood was their only way of having a little fun entertainment. No electricity, no books to read, no radio, so what was left? Gossip. And people living down the lane right behind us had one more advantage. They were able to see the church tower, and there was the only clock people had for many, many years in this town. Narrowest house in the whole county. And when you look at the building, it shows people that then they were not stupid. They started building ground floor very narrow, then they got wider and wider. When you look up, no need to leave the house to talk to the neighbors. All they had to do was open up the window, and they were well informed what neighbors had for lunch, for dinner, or what else interesting was going on. Well, I've heard you do not get enough sweets, desserts, and ice cream and cake and food. Well, this is the place to come to make up for it. Best ice cream in town, homemade gelato. Yeah. So, but one thing I can tell you, looking out the window and spying on the neighborhood, it's not very good for a woman to have to cook. But we had a very smart lady living right at the market square. She was the wife of the baker, little bakery down here. And I guess one day that woman must have said to her husband, well, honey, you better fight me away that I'm able to look out the window all day long without being seen. And that's what she does. You see the window up there? She was able to overlook the whole market square. It was important to see the house over there at the left corner. That was the dance and the ballroom. She always knew who went there with who, but it was much more interesting to see who came out with who. Just to get a little fresh air, of course. I don't know how it is where you are from, but here in my hometown we go to the hairdresser for the latest gossip. But after we've been at the hairdressers, we come here to the bakery to get it confirmed. We always like to come. Just in case, you think buying on the neighborhood is something that only went on during the old days, I can prove you wrong. You see the Asia Walk restaurant, walk to a small window to the left. What do you see attached to the window frame? A mirror. A little mirror. So people can be standing right behind the curtain, look into the mirror and see what's going on. Oh my God. Nothing really changed. Wow. So what do people do like me? I do not. Sit here in one of these little coffee houses, and it doesn't take very long, and I know who's getting a divorce, cheated on the wife, got busted for whatever, and just in case there's still any questions unanswered, all I have to do is take a look at the waiter or the waitress. Right there he is. And the bigger the smoke is on his face, the better the moves are. Unbeaten combination. As a teenager, just follow it.
How many people live here? Oh,
You are too fast.
Oh,
My
okay.
head, you are. I'm old, I mean, I have to take it. Yes.
yeah.
Don't rush her.
Okay.
I will tell you. The right in front of us, we've got our own authentic platform. 1895, oldest authentic platform. But the reason why I like to come here is when you turn around, take a look at that building. That home is typical for the homes we used to have. Very tall, very narrow. Nowadays, we do have beautiful remodeled apartments inside, but only one room per floor. So when you have 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, bathroom, you'll be running up and down all day long. People getting older, knee problem, hip problems. They move out of town, and it's always a challenge to convince families with young kids to move into town, because where do the kids play? Where do you park your car? What's it like bring groceries home? It's so romantic to walk through a town like ours, but if you have to live here, it's far away from being romantic all the time. And very seldom, people are getting the permission to tear down half-timbered houses for many time. And here they got the permission quite a few years ago. And the reason why the place has not been rebuilt where it is, that after the building down, they found out that the neighboring basements were built into their property. So now they are court arguing, fighting who's going to pay for what. But I don't mind that the place has not been rebuilt yet, because it gives you a chance to see what half-timbered really looks like underneath the plastic. And very often they use the dung, the dirt from the stables, to fill out the space in between the wood. You always get to see those well-kept, well-maintained half-timbered houses, and that's underneath the plastic. Now just imagine you have a name into a wall like that and you miss it. That's awful.
How old is that? How old are we looking at?
400 years.
400
years. That one's 800. Yeah. So do not think that all of our stonemasons were talented artists. Because every time when I walk by here and I see that poor thing sitting up there, I wonder what it is. I go, the sheep, the puppy, looks like a horse, ribs showing ears bigger than the whole head, but I gave the poor thing a name. You know how I call it? Wertheim's Mona Lisa. What is wrong with you people? I mean, stand over here. Look at the eyes falling.
Oh yeah, right.
Eyes falling. Look at it smile.
Oh yeah.
And by the way, my husband was born in this building, and up to today he denies that the look of that creature has anything to do with one of his family members. But you know who I think of when I see it? My mother-in-law. Yeah. Look at it. Walk around the corner. Look at it.
Oh.
As the beginning of the tour, I pointed out the one place with the two butcher knives. And here, with using a little imagination, you might be able to tell who was working and living here 1577. Can you see what that is? When I tell you, you see right away. That is a pretzel. You see the pretzel? So we know a baker was living in here. I'm talking about the good old days. Those were the good old days. 15 bakers in our town, 18 butchers, and 1 lawyer. Today, 2 butchers left, 3 bakers, and almost 30 lawyers.
Yeah.
Any lawyers among us today?
No one's gonna admit it.
How can you tell that it's very cold outside? When a lawyer has his hands in his own pocket. And by the way, I'm a volunteer. I do not get I'm retired and this is my hobby. But you have no idea how many lawyer jokes I've been told. Because after my tours, they come up and say, I'm a lawyer, I got a good one for you. But most of them, you cannot
Yeah.
repeat. We're going to leave Maggie in the town center, and they're heading down towards our second, our smaller river, the Elbe River. Go down by the river for me, please. Gosh, it's so loud. I'll be quiet today because it's so loud.
Oh.
Since quite a few of you are taking pictures, let's go on the other side for a minute. A bit further down. Further down. Hauber.
Tanya?
Bit further down. And now there. Oh, the castle.
Oh, here's the castle.
Further down. Got a much better view. Some of you been to Rotenburg yesterday? Nobody? No? Because that's where the Tauber River starts, and to our left, right beside the second bridge, that's the confluence of the 2 rivers. That's the the water you see behind the second bridge, that's the Main River already. That's right. then just follow me. And then you have the permission to tear an old building down and rebuild it on the same spot. You can copy what there has been built before. But if you build something on a spot where there hasn't been built before, you are not allowed to copy. You have to use nowadays style and nowadays material. And that's why we've got this building sitting right here, because this is about 40 years old, right next to the old ones. Doesn't look like it belongs there, but
Yeah.
and yes, we consider this area countryside. We are living in the countryside, but we are only 50 minutes away from Frankfurt International Airport. And taking the speed train from your last stop from Würzburg, within 2 hours we can be down in Munich. So we got all the benefits from living in the countryside, but yet we are close enough to some of the major cities here in Germany. What took you last night, 10, 11 hours to get by boat from Würzburg to Wertheim? Takes us 40 minutes by car. So sometimes people ask me, what is typical German? Give us an example, right? This is a very difficult, a very complicated question to be answered. Because to be honest, I do not know a single person that owns a cuckoo clock. So cuckoo clocks are not typical German. And no, we do not have Jägermeister, sauerkraut and beer for breakfast either. I wait till lunch. But during the pandemic, I did find out what is typical German. Because when all of Europe went through these lockdowns and shutdowns because of COVID, the Italians, they stocked up on red wine. The French, they stocked up on condoms. Germans, different fun factor, toilet paper.
We could for a while. There it is.
But when you take a look at these blood marks, wow, that's what it makes it quite understandable why that wall with the railroad tracks needs to be as high as it is. Because 1995, 2003, 2011, that wall was sitting completely inside the water. And then when the train goes back and forth, it looks like it's driving on top of the water. It looks weird. The worst flood we ever had was the one 1732. The water came completely unexpected by the end of September. Nobody expected a flood by the end of September, and people drowned at night sleeping in their bedrooms. But that was the only time ever people have been killed during a flood. Nowadays, with modern computer technology, they can tell us a week ahead, up to 1 inch, 2-3 centimeters. We know when the water is coming, we know how high it's going to be, but we cannot keep it out of our town. And as you can tell, it's been happening throughout the centuries. It has nothing to do with the climate change. 2003 to 2011, 8 years no flood. 2011 came and we were flooded 3 times within a year, but months in between. So every time we were done fixing, cleaning, getting back to normal, boom, hit again by it. Well, follow it. So these cobblestones, they get quite slippery once it rains. And then the kids add a little soap to it. And then the competition is who dares to slide closest to the river. And the winner ends up in the river. So when you walk around downtown, it seems like the floodlights, they follow you no matter where you go. From here, for example, we've got the flood mark from 1995, 2011. It took a boat to get from here to the market square. And right behind you down there is a parking facility. There's a garage. So when the water's up to here, that garage is completely filled with water. Water goes back into the river, garage remains full of water. It takes pumps, pipes to get the water back out. But before the people use the pumps, that garage is the best place to fish. No, since we got clean spring water in the Tauber River, lots of pike, eel, trout, and once the town is flooded, fish are everywhere. Water goes back into the river, fish gets trapped and stuck in the garage, and people are having a blast. Probably the only advantage of the town being flooded. I don't know if you heard the disturbing news. Germany is not anymore beer drinking nation number one.
No?
Czech came in first, Austria in second, and we are only third place. But we, the Germans, we are the world champions of separating and recycling garbage. We got a blue container for paper, brown organic, gray metal. Our plastic goes in big yellow bags. We take our glass to a container, separated by the color, green, brown, white, just to watch the big garbage truck come and dump it back all in one. And believe it or not, all the bins, all the containers are smart containers. Watch out, there's a car coming. They all got a little computer chip attached to them. So if you put something in a container that does not belong in it, the garbage truck has a device. That device starts to beep, it makes noise. They put a red sticker on it, and the bin don't take it with, just let it sit there till you do it right. The latest thing is, since we use our organic waste for biogas, you cannot put anything in the brown container that will not rot fast enough. So we need a new container for chicken bones or any other bone. Believe it or not, it takes 2 years of college here in Germany to know how to separate your garbage. This is getting ridiculous. The latest thing they terrorize us with, and I'm sure you notice, the lid, the cap of a soda bottle doesn't come off anymore. Try to drink out of the bottle with the cap. My way to rebel, I rip it off. I know, yeah. So getting close to one of my favorite spots in town. From there you're going to have a massive view of our beautiful castle. And you're able to tell what a mighty fortress our beautiful castle used to be. Unfortunately, the castle has been the only building ever to be destroyed during a war. And our castle has been destroyed during the 30-year war, which took place first half of 17th century. And of course, it was a religious war between Protestants and Catholics. And since we were a Protestant county, we were attacked twice by Catholic imperial troops. They had cannons to reach the place from distance, and they were able to destroy our beautiful castle. The reason why the place has never been rebuilt was, within the Duke's family, they could not make up their mind who's going to pay for what. That's why they left it the way it is. And the members of the Duke's family, they started to build little residences downtown. And here we've got one of the little residences for a family of 4. It became too small after a few years. So they moved out of town, sold the building to the people of the town, and that place now is our town hall. And just in case you wonder why a small town like ours needs such a big town hall, well, we do have only 2,000 people living in the Medieval town center, but we have a total of 24,000 inhabitants, 15 incorporated villages, 5 rather large suburbs. We are the richest town in the county, 14,000 highly qualified jobs, unemployment rate less than 2%. So we're doing pretty good, but when you walk around and you see our heritage, then you do understand too, it takes lots of money to maintain all this. Well, I told you quite a bit about the old days, but we do have a modern history too, and there we have a very dark chapter, because in the 1930s, we had the German Air Force come to our town. And this is the market square when they were welcoming the Air Force. We've been there a few minutes, you know. So they built a huge airport on top of the hill. It took the Allied troops quite some time to realize where those planes came from, but then they did find out, and the British Air Force got the order to bomb and destroy the town and its airport. But since we are sitting right here at the confluence of two rivers, we experienced many foggy days. And it must have been an extremely foggy day because people downtown heard the arriving British bombers flying up and down and left and right, but because of the fog, they did not find us. Have you seen what happened to Würzburg? Yeah, after the British were done, when we went to the residency for the photograph, the same British airplanes which did not find us later on put Würzburg into It took decades before they were honored with the flag right on.
Is this the path that you want to go to the castle?
No. I mean, you could walk up there, but that's even steeper than what I'm going to show you. You're busy sightseeing, relaxing, doing all kinds of nice things, but I believe once you visit a new country, different language, you should take the time to learn the language. And this is why we're going to have a little German class right now. This does not read Rathaus. It's not a Rathaus, it's Rathaus, the German word for town hall, city council. A house is a house, and a Rat is a very smart, intelligent person and advisor. Because back in the old days, people were expecting that only the smartest people of a town should be elected into city council to advise the Lord Mayor. That's why the German word for town hall is Rathaus, house full of smart people. I leave that up to your judgment, but it's not a rat house. So back in medieval times, the people liked Greek mythology a lot. And that's why you find in a half-timbered house in the heart of Franconia, and mostly from the Greek mythology, up there is Hercules fighting with a lion. But only for 6 months. After 6 months, they had to pay for the same things again. Why do you think? That's a pretty view of that. Why do you think Martin Luther started Reformation? Because he said you cannot depend on money to have your sins forgiven. And since Luther and our Duke met, and Luther convinced our Duke to become a Protestant, that's why we were one of the very first cities in the state to change from Catholic to Protestant. And with Reformation, the Catholic Church of 200 years became a Protestant. So you wait for me on the other side while I risk my life. Well, I got a lot of other things. His wife, their kids, of course, they used to live up at the castle. But the unmarried sisters of the Duke, they were not supplied with enough money, and that's why they did not find a noble husband. But since they were still noble ladies, they did not want to mingle or associate with commoners like us. And they lived down here in the school and never ever, not once, did they leave their home but to go to church. And for that they even had a bridge so they could enter the church unseen by people like us. Eat, sleep, knit, and pray. That's all they did. And guess what got them? The plague. During the days when the county, the church was still Catholic, the priests, the monks, they collected so much money from the people that there wasn't enough money to be able to pay for that little chapel to be built on our left side. And at the left corner of the balustrade, there it sits, the famous Wertheim monkey, a symbol for vanity. There it is. You need to come up here. The monkey holds a mirror in its hand, and the message behind it is, only monkeys are looking into a mirror 24 hours a day. The monkey wants to be so noble, holds a mirror in its hand, but with its other hand scratches its behind. But ladies, we're talking about vanity. When you take a close look, you're able to tell the monkey is not a girl. And adding those private parts, you can come up here with the private parts. And adding those private parts got that stonemason in serious trouble. Because the Catholic priests were not amused that he added those rather large private parts. He got arrested, thrown in jail, but Reformation came and the Catholic priests were told to get out of the county, and we know for a fact nothing happened to our stonemason. But whatever cost him to add those rather large private parts, we have no idea. No idea. Take a look at our church tower and you're going to notice the clock only has one hand. Why do we have a clock with just one hand? Well, it's one of the oldest clocks here in Germany, and the very first clocks only had our hands. It took them another 150 years before they were able to add minute hands to clocks, and by the time they were able to add minute hands, castle had been destroyed, and people said, why should we waste our money and pay for a minute hand to be added to a clock? Nobody's going to look down from the castle to see what time it is, and that's why they left it the way it is, and that's why we've got one of the oldest clocks here in Germany with just one hand. But they added the minute hand to the clock facing the market square. And for that, they needed a new clockwork. And then they realized, oops, not enough space up there. And that's why we've got this quite unusual little add-on, this little annex for the clockwork, for the minute hand, for the clock facing the market. Written test here in 10 minutes. You better listen to all the people. Now I'm very proud of myself. Perfect time. Let's get away from here. Because that's gonna keep ringing forever. I'm very proud of myself.
Good timing.
Why did you bring that? Why did you bring that?
I don't know. Ask her.
Why did you bring that? And service. Oh, at noon. It's a limited. But they bring that. And then when you're in the Now you can imagine how much teenagers like that to be woken up on the side.
Yeah.
Another reason I live in town. So we almost done with the first part of the talk. I got one more very sad story I'd like to share with you. But before I share my very last very sad story with you, I want to point out where you are and what are your options. But if you would not to hike up to the castle, you just go back where I showed you the monkeys and you follow that step. It's quite steep and it will be quite slippery. Because up there they got the real cars. Big price we couldn't do it. To go back to the train is going to pick you up. You walk the neck of that mountain right before your house. 2 minutes from you and that's where you go. As long as you have the right furniture, you always end up with a house. It's quite safe. Italian people fast. And those of you who would like to join me for another half hour, we're just going to go around the corner where we have the theater, where you can sit down half an hour and afterwards there's still plenty of time to do whatever you want. But I want to tell you about my father-in-law. My father-in-law used to live in the Bohemian Wars, part of Czechoslovakia, was invaded by the Nazis. They drafted all the young men and sent them to fight for the Nazis all over Europe, but my father-in-law ended up in North Africa with the Rommel desert house, and then got captured by the British. And since the British had so many prisoners of war, my father-in-law was handed over to the Americans. They put him on a boat among many other German prisoners of war, sent them across the ocean, and guess where he ended up Huntsville, Texas. Huntsville, Texas, in a huge prisoner war camp, doing what? He plucked cotton for 2.5 years, and then war was over, and the Americans started to send everybody home to the countries where they used to live before the war started. My father-in-law knew that after the war, Czechoslovakia became a member of the communist bloc, and if they sent him home to a communist country after being defeated in the army, they either kill him or ship him off to Siberia. So he always told us he would lie to the Americans, telling them that he was from Bavaria. They believed him to send him home to Bavaria. By coincidence, he ended up here in a small town in Wertheim. He never told much about the years he spent in the camp, but they never knew. He said the father they made him work for was a good man, was a decent man. He even got a beer once in a while. But then he looked at us and he said, yes, we have a beer, but these Sunday morning, the name's Ursula. Good comments are appreciated. If you do have any complaints, everybody joins in from around the house. And those of you who want to go up in the boat, feel free to do so. Thank you very So this is the center.
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, in case somebody wants to record it, that's fine with me, but don't want to see it on here, on Facebook or any social media. This is private. So one more time, welcome to beautiful Wertheim. Name's Ursula, been a tour guide here for quite a few years. And a few years ago, I got a phone call from the town, and they told me, since we always had a Jewish community, always had a synagogue, always a Jewish cemetery, they thought it's a good idea to offer tours Jewish history, and they wanted me to be part of this new project. And I told them I can't do it. And they said, why can't you do it? And I told them, born after the war, I never really went to school or college about the Holocaust, World War I, World War II. That was never ever mentioned when I went to school, so I do not have the appropriate knowledge. But they insisted and insisted, and after a while I thought maybe I should sit down and give it a try, and I started studying. But the more I studied, the more uncomfortable I felt. Me, a German, people like me, about all these horrible atrocities, they did not feel right, I did not want to do it. But then I came across a quote by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize-winning philosopher, and he said, "You do not inherit guilt, but you inherit responsibility." And that changed my mind, and that's why I'm here today. But during my studies, I realized I had to go back to the year 1215. 1215, the Pope in Rome demanded that everybody who wanted to work as a craftsman, baker, butcher, tanner, carpenter, hooper, had to be organized in a guild. And to be a member of a guild back then, you had to be a Catholic or Christian. So from one day to another, it was impossible for a Jewish man to earn a decent living working as a craftsman. Since Jews were not allowed to own land either, they could not work as farmers. So what was left for you to make a living from? Banking and science. It was forbidden by the Bible for Christians to lend money to others to earn interest, so that was left for a Jew to make a living from. Very often people wonder and ask, where did the money come from to start a banking business? Well, Jewish back then was the global language like English is today. If one had to do business with somebody from a duchy or principality and they did not speak their language, they always took a Jew among their group, because a Jew was always able to find another group to translate. And that's how some of them earned enough money to start a banking business. And it was at the time of superstition. Whenever something bad happened, they needed somebody they could blame. And who did they blame? They blamed the Jews. Why? The Jews were the outcasts here in Europe. All of Europe's population turned to Christianity, became Christians, but the Jews. And the Jews were held responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. The Jews murdered the Son of the Lord, they killed Jesus. So whenever something bad happened, hail, flood, bad harvest, things, the cow did not give enough milk, it was always a Jew's fault. A very good example is when the plague, the Black Death, killed half of Europe's population, but not as many Jews compared to Christians died of the plague. The Jews were accused of bell poisoning. Today we know why not as many Jews compared to Christians died of the plague, because of their ritual baths. They were much cleaner. They washed their hands more often. But people back then, they did not know that, and violent riots broke out. A mob went from town to town. They killed the Jews wherever they got a hold of them, or the Jews were forced to commit suicide. Within a short period of time, 350 Jewish communities disappeared alone here in Franconia. And then rumor had it that the Jews were getting a hold of the communion waiver. Communion waiver represents flesh and blood of Jesus Christ for the Catholics, and rumor had it that the Jews were stabbing those communion waivers with knives, cutting them with scissors to kill Christ over and over again. A butcher from a nearby village gathered the mob around him, and again they went from town to town and killed the Jews. We only had 2 Franconian cities to protect the Jewish communities, Augsburg and Regensburg, and all the others just let it happen. Finally, nobility offered the Jews protection, but it was going to cost them money, lots of money, and to be able to pay for the protection, the Jewish bankers had to raise the interest of the loans given to the poor farmers, and again that caused hard feelings. But whenever the protection was needed, what did nobility do quite often? They looked the other way. Why? They had borrowed money from the Jewish bankers too. When the banker was gone, the debt was gone too. Things started to get better when our state became a member of the Napoleon Empire, because Napoleon said all religions are equal, and for a long time, no problems. We elected a Jew here in Wertheim to be our vice mayor. But then World War I started. And the Jews were the largest ethnic group to fight for Germany during World War I. 100,000 Jewish men fought for their country, 12,000 lost their lives, and 30,000 received the Iron Cross for bravery. But then Germany lost the war, and the generals created the so-called stab in the back method. They said, we did not lose the war fighting on the battlefield, we lost it because of a conspiracy, because we were betrayed by people at home, and who betrayed them? The Jews were blamed that they were financing the Republicans to overthrow the monarchy, and then they were financing the communists, and all this led to us losing World War I. Peace Treaty of Versailles, following the loss of World War I, Germany was fined an unbelievable amount of money, compensation, reparation, that led to hyperinflation, big depression, people lost their money, didn't have any jobs. And whose fault was it? It was the Jews' fault. Nazi Party was established, and they used all this for their propaganda. They told people, but that was a fact. After World War I, we had 600,000 Jews living here in Germany. Less than 1% of our population was Jewish, but then less than 1% owned 20% of the national wealth. So here we have lots of people, no money, no jobs, and there was a small group of people owning all that money. That propaganda worked, Nazis were elected, Hitler became chancellor, and we went from a democracy to a dictatorship. But it started back in 1250. If the Jews would have not been forced for a very long period of time to turn to banking and science only, some of them would have never accumulated that wealth led to greed and envy, and what later on happened, we all know. You all seen Schindler's List? Remember the yellow dot the Jews had to put on their coat? People always think this is something the Nazis came up with. No, that goes back to the same Pope, 1215, because he said a Jew had to be identified as a Jew just by looking at the person. That's why Jewish men were made to wear a black hat. The moment they left their home, they had to wear a black coat, and they had to put a yellow dot on the black coat. Orthodox Jews still dress like that nowadays, black hat, black coat. Does anybody know the name of that Pope? I guarantee you will never forget his name. That was Pope Innocent. So after the Nazis took over, 200,000 Jews left Germany right away. The Nazis had the same problem like everybody else. They didn't have any money. And their plan was to create a Germany free of Jews. They wanted them out of the country. At that point, no plan to kill the German Jews. They wanted them out, but confiscate and take away their money. The Nazis always knew they needed an excuse to confiscate the Jewish money. The excuse they got when a young Polish Jew killed a Nazi diplomat in Paris. And that murder in Paris, the Nazis used here in Germany to tell the people that a Jew fired the first shot, that the Jews declared war on the German people. That man who got shot at the embassy in Paris, he was an undersecretary, and nobody knew this man here in Germany. And since we still got the medical records, we know that man could have been saved, because the Nazis sent their best doctors from Berlin to Paris to save him, but the Nazis found out that he was gay, so he was much more healthy dead than alive and gay. And after he passed away, violent riots broke out all over Germany, night of the broken glass, Kristallnacht. The Nazis always said what happened during Kristallnacht was a spontaneous reaction of the good German people being so upset about that murder in Paris. But like I told you, nobody knew this man here in Germany. And today, when you type in a text message in your smartphone, you can reach lots of people within a split of a second, but we are talking about the 1930s. How was it possible that the information about that man passing away in Paris reached everybody here in Germany within one day? We know that because the paramilitary troopers, the stormtroopers, the men in uniform, were giving the order to change into civilian clothes, so it looks spontaneous. Takes man shells and go out and demolish everything they found owned by Jews in one night. In one night, they demolished, looted, ransacked over 7,000 businesses, shops and stores owned by Jews, and they burned down and destroyed over 1,100 synagogues in one night. And during Kristallnacht, Jewish women were raped by paramilitary troopers. These men were all arrested, they were all charged, they were all severely punished, but not for the rape, but for having sex with the wrong race. That was their crime. And the Jewish community was given for their hostile behavior towards the German people and for the murder in Paris. They were giving a collective fine of 1.5 billion Reichsmark, an equivalent to over $5 billion nowadays. And to put pressure on the Jews to hand over the money and get out of the country, the Nazis arrested over 30,000 Jewish men and sent them where? Dachau, Sachsenhausen, concentration camps, but no gas chamber failure, just to put pressure on the Jews to hand over the money and get out of the country. And it worked. After Kristallnacht, another 200,000 Jews left Germany. And to many people, including myself, Night of the Broken Glass is the beginning of the Holocaust. Because from there the persecution changed from social, cultural, political, economical to physical. Incarceration, beatings and murder. And already 2 years before Kristallnacht, 1936, the Nazis thought they had the perfect excuse to confiscate the Jewish money when a Croatian Jew killed the founder of the Swiss Nazi Party. But Hitler himself said, no, we're not going to react to the murder. You know why not? Because it was too close to the Summer Olympic Games held in Berlin. The Nazis didn't want to have any interference with those games because they were afraid that other nations would boycott them the games. Because the Nazis realized very early what a good platform those games could be to show the whole world what a fantastic country Nazi Germany was, what a great leader Adolf Hitler was. That's why they didn't want to have any interference. But there was already a big movement in the United States to boycott these games. Because people back in the States have heard how Jews were getting treated over here, and then all Jewish sportsmen were evicted from the German national Olympic team, that no Jew was allowed to participate for Germany, and that's why lots of Americans wanted to boycott these games. That's why the National Committee of the United States for the Olympic Games, they sent every branch to Berlin, to Germany, to find out what the situation is. He talked to lots of people, went everywhere, talked to lots of Jews, and then he went back to the States and he told his committee, and that's an original quote. He said, I do not understand what the big deal is, because at my gym, at my sports club in Chicago, we do not accept Jews either. By a couple of votes, the Americans did not boycott the summer games held in Berlin. Anti-Semitism at that time was everywhere. And then people realized that after Kristallnacht, that there were only 200,000 Jews left here in Germany, where does the unbelievable number of 6.5 million Jewish Nazi terror victims came from, when there were only 200,000 Jews left here in the country? When Nazi Germany invaded other countries, Ukraine, Poland, Russia, there were all these Jews. And why were there so many Jews in Poland? Because during the medieval pogroms and riots here in Franconia and at the Rhine Valley, the Polish kings offered the Jews from Germany a safe haven in Poland, and that's why so many German Jews immigrated to Poland. And with the help of the locals and the Nazis, had a strategic alliance with IBM. They used IBM punch cards to identify minorities. If you're interested, all you have to do is Google IBM and Nazis, and you're going to be surprised at what you're going to find. So with the help of the locals, the Jews were gathered together, and the first million of the 6.5 million Jewish Nazi terror victims, they were shot. We had soldiers with nothing else all day long but to shoot people. At its peak, 40,000 a day. And then they realized again we ran out of ammunition. And women were told to hold the babies close to the heart, that it only takes one bullet. In Budapest, on the chain bridge, they tied 5 Jews at the time together, shot one, threw them over the bridge, that the dead one would drown the other 4. It did not work. They still ran out of ammunition. And that's when they realized they needed to find a solution. And that's when they started to build concentration camps with gas chambers, most of them in Eastern Europe. Average age of the soldiers shooting these people? 19 years old. But when I talk about all these horrible things, sometimes people say to me, well, you're German, what does it do to you? Well, I do not believe in collective guilt. I do not feel guilty, but what I feel is lots of shame. Shame because my generation, the post-war generation, could have done much better. It took us till 1978 to change the curriculum in school. My children were taken by their schools twice to go and visit a concentration camp. I've never heard a word in school about the Holocaust, World War I, World War II. That was never ever mentioned. I'm an expert in Roman and Greek history. That's what they taught, but not one single word about our own history. And this is only taught by that it took us till 1998 to reverse verdicts from the Nazi era. People brave enough to be resistance group members, to fight the Nazis, resist, speak up against them. They were arrested, court-martialed, sentenced to death, brutally murdered, and they were convicted criminals till 1998. And that's why I don't feel guilty, but I feel lots of shame, because that was way too long before this got reversed. And very often I was told too, well, it's one thing never to be in school or college about all this, or what about your family? Mom and dad, grandparents never talked about it. They did not. And you know why not? Because my people left Germany over 200 years ago and went and settled in Hungary. Hungary, a member of the Austrian Empire, and when the Turks tried to invade Europe on their way to Vienna, they killed many Hungarian people. And that's why the Austrian Empress offered land to German farmers to go and colonize Hungary again. That's why my people left Germany and settled in a small village right outside Budapest. After World War I, Hungary became independent from Austria, and my people all became Hungarian citizens. Hungary, an ally of the Nazis, together with the Nazis, they declared war on Russia. And during the Nazi era in Hungary, people were asked, what is your nationality? Because at that time, Hungary was a melting pot of Serbs, Croatians, Germans, Austrians. So people were asked, what is your nationality? My people wrote down Hungarian, of course. Second question was, what is your first language? And since they were still talking German at home, they wrote down first language German. War was lost. Hungary became a member of the communist bloc. The communists got a hold of this record, and they saw 200,000 people in Hungary claiming to be Hungarians, but first language German, and they were all told to go back to Germany. My grandpa was a very wealthy man. He owned a huge farm, vineyards, cattle, lost everything. My dad, 17 years old, first one from the family to go to college, always told us they were allowed to take 40 pounds of groceries with them, including the food for a trip and journey. Nobody knew how long it was going to last, and everything sentimental and everything valuable had to stay behind. They were put on a train they usually transported cattle with, and the train had put them towards the east. And everybody on the train started yelling, screaming, crying, because they thought it would be taken to Siberia to compensate the Soviets of what Nazi Germany was responsible for. But in a big loop, the train went around, went to the west, and after 3 weeks on the road, the train stopped here in the little town of Wertheim. Why? Because from the Nazi era, they had empty Air Force barracks. So they put us evicted, dispossessed Hungarian people in those former Air Force barracks. And here we were in a town where they treated the Jews extremely bad. They made Adolf Hitler an honorary citizen. They ran the democratic elected mayor out of office, replaced him with a good Nazi. Already the year the Nazis took over, they put up big signs at city limits telling people, we do not welcome Jews in our town, and they placed the paramilitary troopers, the men in uniform, outside shops and stores owned by Jews to make sure that nobody is doing business with the Jews anymore. And when the last Jews were taken to the concentration camp, they let all their neighbors into the Jewish homes to take out what they could use, what they could need. And here we were in this little town. After being kicked out of our country, we were Hungarians with German roots. My dad had black hair and brown eyes, and guess how they called us? We were the gypsies. They called us the gypsies. The Hungarians took away our Hungarian nationality, and here in Germany, it said in our passports for many, many years, we were privileged like Germans. We were nothing. It took us 2 generations to get back on our feet. My grandpa never recuperated from losing everything. He died early 1960, and my grandma, she lived to the age of 88, and to me as a kid it seemed that every single day in that woman's life, she talked about going back home. Going back home was a big thing in my family. So 1964, my dad had a chance to get a visa to take us kids to then communist Hungary to show us what it's like back home. I came back in a state of shock. The farm looked horrible, vineyards didn't exist anymore, cattle was all gone, Soviet soldiers with their Kalashnikovs everywhere. So when we came back home, I asked my grandma if we could stay with her just in case the rest of the family decides to go back home. I was living in fear my whole childhood that we had to go back home. I was 10 years old and I swore, and I kept that promise till today, never ever would I visit a communist country. So many victims of Nazi terror. I am not comparing what happened to my people with the fate of the Jews. I am not. But homosexuals, mentally ill, handicapped, the people like us, all victims of Nazi terror. I don't know where you are from, but if you are from the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you know where your ancestors came from. And if they point at you and tell you because you got Dutch, Swedish, French, Irish, or whatever roots, get out and leave everything behind. That's what happened to my people. Everything's fine now, everything's fine now. But the older I get, the more painful it gets, because the elders, they're all gone, and I would give so much to let my grandpa know that everything turned out good, that the great-grandchildren are doing very well. But they are gone, and I feel so bad that I didn't listen or that I didn't ask for. But in the 60s, when I was a teenager, Elvis Presley, rock and roll, everything was more important than to listen to their voices. And now they are gone, and I was way up in my 40s and 50s before I realized what it must have been for my grandparents to lose everything what generations accomplished and to be too old to start over again. College for my dad was over because he had to work hard to get the ration cards to support the elders and the family. Everything's fine now, everything's fine now. But when Hungary became a member of the EU, they offered compensation to people like us. And they offered my dad, for everything they took away, 2,000 euros. My dad said no thank you. He said other words, But he did not accept that money. It was an insult. And again, money. It was the Jewish money, the billions the Nazis confiscated. That money went straight into the infrastructure warfare and enabled the Nazis to start warfare too as early as they did. They would have started it about, no doubt about it, but it was the Jewish money that helped them to start the war as early as they did, and it was whatever the former German colonists owned in Hungary, the communists took. It's always money, it's always war. Yeah. You all know about the Stumbling Stones? Yeah. The little breastplates they got outside? And we got 100 of them in our town. 30 belong to Jewish Nazi terror victims, and the other 70 belong to our mentally ill and handicapped. Because before the Nazis murdered the Jews, they killed our handicapped people. And they had lists of names of the family members made up. We still got the list, and that was the plan. They wanted to murder the family members of the handicapped to keep the bloodline clean and for racial hygiene. Yeah. And when you go up to Cologne in a couple of days, you're going to find 2,000 all over the city. And if you have a chance to go to Munich, you will not find a single one. Because the Jewish community of Munich does not find it appropriate that the information about Jewish Nazi terror victims is on the ground. It gets dirty, people walk over it, don't notice it. They have their information at the wall, you walk up to it, you can read it. But most German cities find it quite appropriate that is on the ground, because in order that you're able to read it, you have to stand right in front of it and you bow. And that's your way of showing respect to Nazi terror victims. I want to show you the market square one more time. I know it might be, you have seen it, it was not in my book. I want to point out a very small detail. And it was not in my book. I got enough. This is the market square when we were not in Wertheim, the Air Force used to our town. Market square.
What year is this?
Huh?
What year?
That's in the mid-30s, 35. And right in the middle, used to be a department store owned by a Jewish family, the family Haidt. They shipped the 3 daughters off to Great Britain. Mom and Dad stayed behind because the Jewish dad served his country as an officer. And he thought if he would go with the flow, if he would keep everything on a low profile, nothing is going to happen to him and his wife. The 3 girls in Great Britain survived the Holocaust. Him and his wife ended up dying in Auschwitz. But when you take a close look, what do you see hanging out the top window? Home owned by a Jewish family? There's an answer. So when I noticed, I asked around, swastika, Nazi flag, Jewish home? Nobody really knew. But one of the daughters, which survived the Holocaust in Great Britain, she published some of the letters Mom and Dad wrote to the girls by the kids here in Great Britain. That's why we know the Jewish dad put up the flag himself. Because in the mid-30s, 1.5 years after the Nazis took over, they did not see it coming. Yeah? And if you go back out, right around the corner, the market square, third building to the right, when you look up, the flagpole is still there, and then you look on the ground, you find there 2 stumbling stones. So when you take a close look, you are going to notice the names of 2 concentration camps. Why 2 concentration camps? The Jews which did not make it out in time to the state, they were gathered together and they were transported to a concentration camp in France. And there they were given for 2 long years the opportunity to find a country to immigrate to. Who was successful to find a sponsor, a country to accept them, was allowed to leave. And who failed, like most Jews did, including that couple, was later on transported back to the east, and they ended up dying in Auschwitz. They tried to get into the US. The US had an immigration quota of 50,000 Jewish immigrants per year from Austria and Germany. The US had an unemployment rate of 12%. Roosevelt wanted to get re-elected. It was a political decision not to accept more Jews in the country. Canada's response to Jewish immigration was, 1 Jew is already one too many. Australia said, since we don't have racism and anti-Semitism in our country, we are not desirous of importing it. South Africa, for example, only accepted Jews which already had close relatives in the country. Dominican Republic and Costa Rica were the only two countries to raise their quota. Shanghai took 40,000 Jews. A very good example is the voyage of the St. Louis, a ship with 1,000 Jewish immigrants to Cuba. They paid to get legal documents to be accepted into Cuba, and by the time the boat reached Cuba, the Cubans changed the law, did not let them get off the boat. Then the captain tried to get these people into the US. They were denied entrance, and the Coast Guard made sure that the boat was never able to get close enough to the coast that people were able to jump overboard. Then the captain tried to get the Jews into Canada. Same thing happened there. They were denied entrance, and then the boat was ordered back to Germany. But the German captain refused the order, and he cruised the English Channel till finally Great Britain, Belgium, Netherlands, and France accepted those 1,000 Jewish refugees. The lucky ones were able to go to Great Britain. The other three countries later on were invaded by the Nazis. And the people, the Jews with legal documents already across the ocean, ended up dying in concentration camps. And the more I studied, the more questions I had. My biggest question is that it is a proven fact that the intelligence services of the US and Great Britain knew 1 year before Auschwitz was liberated what was happening in Auschwitz. They murdered in Auschwitz alone 1.5 million Jews. Why did they not destroy the camp, but the infrastructure, the railroad tracks, the roads? Every day, hundreds of trains reach Auschwitz. Why didn't they destroy it?
What's your theory on that?
Huh?
What is your theory? Why did they not destroy it?
We don't know.
There's no,
We don't know. No, we don't know. No. The people responsible are not gone. Yeah. Yeah. And why didn't the churches ever say anything? Yeah. Catholic Church, Protestant Church, they had an agreement. I don't mess with you, you don't mess with me. And if you ever run into a German and they tell you they had no idea what was happening during the Holocaust, for World War I, World War II, could be my people, because we weren't even here at that time. When we came over here in 1947, war has been over for 2 years, and nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about it. It took me lots of interviews, lots of research, before I did find out which of the people who lived in my houses were once confiscated from Jews and given to the Nazi photos. Because people living there since they were confiscated, they acted like they've been living there for generations. Nobody talked about it. So we weren't here, yeah, but we paid a very high price for their crimes. But 1 million Germans were active part of the Holocaust. Bus driver, chemist, clerk, guy calling they knew. But do you have any questions?
Are you worried about what's happening in the U.S. right now?
I am worried what's happening worldwide. I mean, it's India, it's Pakistan, yeah? Yeah, the Muslims kill the Hindus kill the Muslims, yeah? It's, if you Google, just Google how many genocides took place since the Holocaust. Yeah? Genocides we don't even read about it. Yeah? And I think it's very important for us to educate our young people. The problem here in Europe is it's astonishing how uninformed, and they have no idea. They run around here and scream from the river to the sea, free Palestine, and then they were asked, name the river, name the sea, and 60% of our students, people going to the university, graduating, they were not able to name the river nor the sea. Yeah? They never heard of River Jordan and the That's, I think this is what we should do. We all should be worried like that, all of us.
What did you say, total innocence?
1255. 1200. That's when we said to be a member of a guild, you have to be legally married. You were not able to have an illegitimate child. That's not good for working as a craftsman. Yeah.
What is the Jewish population in Germany now?
We have more Jews now in the country what we had after Kristallnacht. Germany has the fastest growing Jewish community worldwide. When the Russians allowed their Jews 1990 after the Iron Curtain came down to leave the country, the Russian Jews were given the option either to go to Israel, the US, or Germany, and most of them picked Germany. But we here in Wertheim, we do not have any Jews because the Jews here in Germany, they live in metropolitan areas because their synagogues, their facilities, they need protection 24 hours a day, like any other place in the world. Okay? And yes, we do have big problems since 2015, since the immigration. Yeah? Big problems. We have now local areas in Berlin or bigger cities. Till 2015, the Jew was a Jew, nobody. You could go with wearing a kippah or the Star of David any place in Germany. Nobody cared, really.
Mm-hmm.
But now,
Yeah.
but that's
In a German way.
in all of your countries too.
My kids went to Catholic. My kids went to Catholic school in Las Vegas. But their 6th grade field trip was to the Holocaust Museum in LA, which I thought was great that they took them all the way over there because otherwise they weren't taught anything.
No, they wanted to erase history from my generation, yeah, and just when you're bored, or I don't think you're on a very nice trip, just think about this. Germany lost World War II. Were we defeated or were we liberated? Think about it. It's what perspective you have, yeah? Yeah. Well, I have considered the founder of the Jewish community of Wertheim first mentioned 182. Even for us, old Germans, who are the So when you go back up, just watch your step. To the left, Market Square is right here in front of us. To the left is where the trading store is here. All the coffee houses here in the Market Square, you can use their restaurants. And or at the pub, at the office right here at the Market Square. Thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you.
I got one more advice for the
One of the
gentlemen.
best ones.
Just in case you do go into one of our pubs, do me a favor, do not order a small beer. They might tell you to come back when you're thirsty.
Right.
Yeah. I have to take my coat.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll get it.